Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rivera and the members of your committee. My name is Benny Boscio Jr. I am the president of the Correction Officers Benevolent Association, the second largest law enforcement union in the city of New York. Our members, as you know, provide care, custody, and control for approximately 5,700 inmates daily. Today's hearing focuses on the mayor's preliminary budget for fiscal year 2023 as it relates to the New York City Department of Corrections. A few weeks ago, WNBC News featured an interview with 3 correction officers who work at 3 different facilities on Rikers Island. Each of the officers said they're at a breaking point. They described daily violence at their facilities, with one officer even admitting she fears for her life every day. Another officer who was involved in 3 different inmate-on-inmate fights, including a stabbing incident, said that each time she called for backup, no backup arrived. These stories are just a small example of what our officers are forced to deal with every day while getting assaulted, including sexually assaulted. No matter what your political ideology may be, we can all agree that the failures of former Mayor de Blasio's gross mismanagement of the jails over the past 8 years have created one of the worst humanitarian crises our city's jails have ever faced. At the core of this crisis lies a severe staffing shortage, which was created by the city's failure to hire additional officers for 3 years, even as the inmate population rose significantly and jail violence skyrocketed year after year. For far too long, the media and certain special interest groups have grossly mischaracterized our staffing situation, with some even claiming that the New York City Department of Corrections has one of the richest staffing levels of correction officers in the nation. I want to use my testimony today as an opportunity to dispel this myth and to outline the realities concerning both our staffing levels and our staffing needs. We have approximately 7,000 correction officers who work across 3 different tours of duty. They are not all deployed at the same time. In any given housing area, there are 50 inmates to 1 correction officer. Not hiring correction officers for 3 years has decimated us. Between January 1 of 2019 to February 28th of 2022, there have been 1,745 resignations and 1,019 retirements. That is a total of 2,764 officer positions that have been permanently lost. In that same period of time, only approximately 75 officers graduated from the Correction Academy, which just took place January 31st of this year. Historically, the New York City Department of Correction has not kept up with proper staffing levels of correction officers. There are many elements that have to be considered when staffing each jail facility to maintain safety and security. Each command has a table of organization, a TO, which is the formula that shows how many officers are needed to run the budgeted post in that command on a 24/7 basis. For years, there have been hundreds of unbudgeted posts that require additional officers to be deployed at those posts. Unbudgeted posts, also referred to as facility added posts, require officers to work at those posts, but they have not been authorized for funding by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Since OMB has not funded them, they are not added to the TO. However, the agency is authorized to run the additional posts on overtime. For example, some inmate programs have been added in recent years requiring additional officers to supervise those programs. In addition, special housing units such as the Enhanced Supervision Housing Unit, ESH, requires about 7 officers to supervise each of those housing areas. Yet on paper, one will only see 2 correction officers deployed there. This has been a critical problem for COBA because it doesn't show the correct number of officers that are actually needed to supervise each command safely and security. I call this the Department of Corrections' dirty little secret that has been happening for many years. This is also one of many factors that have contributed to significant rises in overtime. It is imperative that the city hire the proper number of officers that is required to supervise every post that is required the presence of an officer. Every post must be manned and accounted for on paper. Currently, there are 2 jails on Rikers Island that fully that are fully operational, but are technically not showing as officially being opened on paper. Those facilities are the Eric M. Taylor Center and the Otis Bantam Correctional Center. There also has to be additional officers to backfill posts to maintain safety and security, and to ensure the inmates receive their mandated services. Over 1,500 officers have been assaulted in the last year. Many of those officers haven't fully recovered from their injuries. Some of them have come back to work on a medically monitored MMR status, also known as light duty. When officers are MMR status, they cannot have any inmate contact, which prevents them from working in a housing area and supervising inmates on the floor. Correction officers must be on full duty status in order to work in housing areas with violent, assaultive inmates. If they are not 100% physically, how can they protect themselves or the other inmates in their supervision? We also have officers dealing with the long-term effects of COVID, and some who are dealing with terminal illnesses. Over approximately 3,000 officers contracted COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. Because the city did not hire additional officers in 3 years, hundreds of officers were forced to work double shifts, triple shifts, and sometimes quadruple shifts with no meal breaks or rest. Some officers were even forced to sleep in their cars in the parking lot of Rikers because they were too exhausted to drive home. How can anyone think that the sick rate wouldn't rise significantly when our officers are putting in such a significant amount of overtime on a weekly basis? When budgeting for staffing levels, there are many factors that must be considered. These factors include the risk management accountability system. That will require an additional 700 officers to supervise inmates during out of cell time, including 5 hours of daily activity with counselors, social workers, intervention specialists, and community providers. There are vacation picks there are two vacation picks a year that total 27 days a year. One pick is 3 weeks, the other pick is 2 weeks. Yearly academy block training and firearms requalification. Every officer must go to the Correction Academy for 4 days of training and 1 day at the Firearms and Tactic Unit. We have officers on military leave, the Armed Forces Reserve that get deployed and go for training in the military. FMLA, we have officers who are on leave caring for an ill family member. Maternity leave. About 44% of correction officers are women and they are entitled to take maternity leave. Suicide watch. Every inmate that is deemed suicidal requires one-on-one supervision by an officer. So technically, if there are 4 suicidal inmates in a housing area, it will require 4 additional officers to supervise that housing area. Hospital runs. When an inmate requires medical attention at a hospital, 2 officers are required to take that inmate to the hospital. These situations arise frequently in every facility, yet are not accounted for when it comes to staffing. Personal emergencies. We have many single parents on the job. If officers have to take their children to the hospital, that prevents them from going to work. The bottom line is that safe staffing levels matter. Whether it is properly supervising areas, providing backup when violent incidents occur, preventing suicides, transporting inmates to and from the hospital and from their court appearances, supervising inmate visits and inmate programs, all roads lead to a safe and secure jail system, lead to maintaining proper staffing levels. We need 2,500 more officers to backfill the vacancies created over the past several years and the vacancies that will continue to emerge the months and years ahead. The previous administration's experiment to divest from our workforce while forcing our officers to do more with less has failed miserably. Those failures have needlessly hurt the lives of countless correction officers and the inmates in our custody. It's time to turn the page. With that said, I am happy to answer any of your questions and I appreciate you allowing me the extra time to speak.